Nancy Guthrie missing day 39.
Details about what is in that note. Guthrie's purported abductor is demanding
What if the most dangerous person in your life was a stranger? What if it was someone who knew the code to your gate, the name of your doctor, and exactly which app was monitoring your heartbeat at 2 a.m? What if the person who planned every detail of your disappearance had sat across from you at dinner the week before? That is the question that keeps investigators up at night in the case of Nancy Guthrie. And the more you look at the evidence, the harder that question becomes to ignore. Black screen, a single heartbeat, slow, heavy, the kind you feel in your chest when something is deeply wrong. We open on the Catalina foothills of Arizona, one of the wealthiest zip codes in the entire country. Sprawling estates hidden behind high walls, private security, gated driveways lined with desert palms. The kind of neighborhood where nothing is supposed to go wrong, because every single thing has been designed to keep trouble out. But on the night of January 31st, trouble didn't come from outside. It was already there. An 84-year-old socialite vanishes from a high-security estate. A masked figure is caught on surveillance tape. $1 million cryptocurrency ransom is demanded. And then silence. Complete, total silence. No one claims the money. No one makes a move. No demands are repeated. No contact is made. The crypto wallets sit untouched. The clock ticks. And the world waits for an answer that never comes. This is not a simple missing persons case. This is not a random crime of opportunity. Every detail of this story, from the surveillance footage to the forensic evidence to the financial trail, points to something far more deliberate, far more calculated, and far more disturbing than the headlines ever revealed. This is the mystery of Nancy Guthrie. And the deeper you go, the less any of it makes sense. To understand what happened that night, you have to understand the woman at the center of it. Nancy Guthrie was not just a name on a building. She was not just a face at a charity gala or a signature on a donation check. She was a woman who still wrote handwritten thank you notes to her gardeners every season, without fail. The kind of gesture that nobody asks for and nobody forgets. People who worked for her didn't just work for her. They genuinely cared about her. That detail matters, because it tells you something about who was lost on January 31st that no court document ever will. She moved through powerful circles, corporate networks, philanthropic boards, social connections that reached into places most people never see. She had spent decades building a life that was, by every measure, extraordinary. And she lived in a home that reflected that. High walls, a sophisticated security system, medical monitoring technology that tracked her vitals in real time and could alert caregivers at the very first sign of trouble. On paper, Nancy Guthrie was completely protected. On paper, nothing should have been able to touch her. January 31st begins like any other evening at the estate. Somewhere in the kitchen, a teacup is left on the counter, still warm, barely touched. The kind of small, ordinary detail you wouldn't notice unless you were already looking for it, unless you knew that the person who set it down never came back to finish it. That teacup would later become one of the most haunting details in this entire case, not because of what it is, but because of what it represents. A moment frozen in time, a life interrupted mid-sentence. The clock in the hallway kept ticking that night, completely unaware that the person who wounded every morning was no longer there. Time moved forward. The house did not. And then the medical monitoring app goes offline. Not a glitch, not a slow fade. It cuts off suddenly and completely, as if someone knew exactly where it was, exactly how it worked, and exactly how to shut it down. That level of precision is not accidental. You don't stumble onto a medical monitoring system and happen to disable it. You know it exists. You plan for it in advance. You come prepared with a specific purpose. Security footage captures what happens next. A masked figure moves through the estate with a confidence that is deeply unsettling. No hesitation. No wasted movement. No panic. The intruder moves the way someone moves when they've walked that route before, or rehearsed it until it became second nature. Investigators watching that footage would later use a word that doesn't normally appear in kidnapping cases. They call the movements controlled. And in a case full of disturbing details, that one word might be the most disturbing of all. Because when a crime looks this clean, this precise, this rehearsed, that is not coincidence. That is a signature. The gates that were designed to keep the entire world out ended up trapping a secret inside. When investigators begin processing the scene, they find two categories of evidence, and both of them refuse to behave the way evidence is supposed to behave. The first is the cryptocurrency ransom. Over $1 million demanded in digital currency, a tactic that promises anonymity, speed, and financial trail nearly impossible to follow. In theory, the perfect crime vehicle. But here's the single detail that changes everything. Not $1 was ever moved. The wallets were created. The demand was made. And then absolutely nothing happened. No collection. No transfer. No attempt to access the funds at any point before or after the disappearance. But investigators didn't stop there. They traced the IP address linked to the wallet creation. What they found was not the work of an amateur. The signal bounced from Singapore to Zurich, and then to a burner phone somewhere in Mexico, before vanishing completely into the digital dark. Whoever built this trail didn't just understand cryptocurrency. They understood how to disappear inside the internet itself. This was not someone who watched a tutorial online. This was someone with experience. Someone who had rehearsed their digital exit the same way the masked figure had rehearsed their physical one. As one retired task force member who reviewed similar cases put it, even the best criminals leave a trace. But here, the trace itself felt like a distraction. And that is exactly what it was. The crypto demand was never about collecting money. It was a smokescreen, something designed to pull every eye and every resource in one direction, while the real objective was achieved somewhere else entirely. You were supposed to follow the wallet. You were supposed to chase the ransom. That was the plan. The second category of evidence is DNA. Crime scene technicians identified two completely separate, unidentified profiles at the scene. Two people inside that house who had no business being there. But here is what makes this finding so extraordinary. Neither profile matches Nancy Guthrie, and the two profiles do not match each other. These are not associates. These are not two people operating from the same network. These are two individuals whose identities remain entirely unknown to this day. Two strangers who moved through that estate, completed whatever they came to do, and left behind almost nothing. Almost. Somewhere out there, two people know exactly what happened inside that house. And so far, they have not said a single word as the investigation deepens. The lens begins to turn, not just toward who did this, but toward who could have done this. People close to the household describe a noticeable shift in the weeks leading up to January 31st. A tension that hadn't been there before. Unspoken pressure accumulating beneath the surface. The kind of friction that doesn't announce itself loudly, but builds quietly until something finally breaks. These details don't prove anything standing alone, but they matter deeply because they tell you that something was already moving before the night everything collapsed. The FBI does not upgrade a case to a full task force without serious reason. That decision means expanded resources, federal jurisdiction, and a level of commitment that signals one thing clearly. This is no longer a question of whether someone is responsible. It is a question of proving it. The issuance of arrest warrants takes that signal even further. Federal investigators have moved past asking questions. They are now in the stage of building a case. And when you combine that with Nancy Guthrie's network, the corporate connections, the philanthropic reach, the room she had access to that most people will never enter, the picture becomes far more layered than a straightforward abduction. Powerful connections create powerful stakes. And powerful stakes give people powerful reasons to make sure certain things stay hidden. When you lay every piece of this out together, two possibilities emerge. And both of them lead somewhere deeply uncomfortable. The first is a professional operation, planned far in advance, executed by people with the resources and the discipline to do it cleanly. The ransom was misdirection. The digital trail, Singapore, Zurich, Mexico, was engineered to be chased and then lost. The two unknown DNA profiles belonged to professionals who were hired, did their job, and disappeared. Whatever the true objective was, it was accomplished in complete darkness, while the world was focused entirely on the wrong thing. The second possibility is the one that is hardest to say. What if the people who designed this were never strangers at all? What if the person or people behind this had intimate knowledge of that estate, the security layout, the monitoring technology, the daily routine, the access codes? That level of detail does not come from surveillance or research alone. It comes from proximity. It comes from being trusted. And if that is true, then the most dangerous place in Nancy Guthrie's world was never on the other side of those gates. It was sitting right beside her. The teacup is still on the counter. The clock is ticking in an empty hallway. The monitoring app cut to black. The money that nobody ever claimed. A digital trail that dissolved across 3 continents and went completely dark. 2 strangers whose DNA was recovered from the scene and whose names remain unknown. A federal investigation. Arrest warrants. And at the center of everything, a woman who wrote thank you notes by hand to the people who tended her garden, whose disappearance deserves far more than a headline and far more than silence. Every piece of this case is still speaking, and the moment the full truth finally comes into the light, everything about this story changes. Do you believe this was a cold, professional operation carried out by outsiders who knew exactly how to vanish into the digital shadows? Or is the real answer buried much closer to home, hidden inside relationships built on trust that someone decided to destroy? Drop your theory in the comments below. And if you want to be the first to know the moment this case breaks open, make sure you are subscribed, because this story is nowhere near finished.